Now, moving on to the next conversation on the show today, we are looking at Nigeria's journey to food sufficiency. Now, experts say innovative irrigation and food processing solutions, as well as large-scale mechanized farming, are areas the new administration needs to focus on to drive the country's journey to food sufficiency. Now, Kola Masha, the Chief Executive Officer of Babban, Gona, joins me now to assess the agri sector's performance in the first half of this year and what reforms may stimulate the growth in the second half of the year. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today, Mr. Masha, for your time. Before we get into what's going to happen within the second half of this year, let's have your assessment of the first half year performance. That's what we are doing now, really, because we are in the month of July and we just have to check how well we've fared so far. We saw an initial contraction of the agri sector, about 0.9% in the first quarter of the year. We're still waiting for the second quarter result in terms of the GDP contribution from the agri sector. But from your lens, what were the big issues that caused this drag?
Well, I think fundamentally, at the end of the day, we saw coming out of the floods in 2022, a huge impact on productivity. And I think that drop in productivity is probably the key driver of this drop. I think also issues around the cash constraint, I think that you alluded to earlier, contributed to some degree, as well as it just made it much more difficult to trade during a very key period of the harvest season, of the main harvest season that happens typically in the beginning of the last quarter.
And now for the second half of the year, we're also seeing the removal of petrol subsidy. This is likely going to also increase much higher the cost of transporting food items from the farms to the markets. I would like to have your take on that, especially for the fact that the World Bank is also saying that we are going to likely see this elevated cost in terms of fertilizers continue to remain for quite a while longer. Input costs are a whole lot to have to deal with now. In terms of what should be the top agenda for this new administration, you're hearing experts say mechanized farming, you're looking at other innovative solutions towards irrigation and also mitigating climate impact as well. How big of an order and pacing ourselves, what are some of the strategic areas this new government has to take on right away? We're seeing the raft of reforms already.
Well, there's really one key focus area they need to focus on. That is increasing farm level productivity. That is yield. That is the underlying challenge that is inhibiting the growth of the agriculture sector. And really, at the end of the day, there's one major lever that the government can use to increase yield dramatically. And that is increasing farmers' access to financing, debt, to purchase the quality and quantity of inputs they need to get those best practice yields. Fundamentally, you look at a country like Thailand that is very similar from an agricultural standpoint to Nigeria. Thailand has used agriculture to drive tremendous growth in their economy, nearly more than a 15x growth in the last 40 years. But if you compare Nigeria farmers to Thai farmers, Thai farmers have 10 times more access to financing. In turn, that means they have 10 times more access to fertilizer and 10 times better access to improved seeds. At the core, what drives productivity.
And looking at the grain market now, talking about seeds and what sort of output, Nigeria is trying to leverage increased production in terms of paddy rice. Now, the FAO is forecasting we'll likely see a production volume of about 5.4 million tons of rice. Rice is a staple here. We are still dealing with issues around imported rice and a whole lot more. But do you think Nigeria can achieve this increase in terms of our production levels?
Well, I think Nigeria has, over the last nearly a decade, I think has been a consistent focus on trying to improve rice production. I remember back in 2011, we were seeing probably around 3 million tons of rice. So you're seeing nearly double the quantum of rice produced in Nigeria. Now, the fundamental fact is that demand for rice is growing at an even greater rate.
Yeah.
I think some studies are showing that Nigeria could consume well over 20 million tons by 2040. So I think there still needs to be increased effort there. Fundamentally, the first and foremost being that access to finance, so farmers can purchase the good quality fertilizer, good quality seeds, and then really at the end of the day, price is not the problem, right? If you unlock capital, farmers will have the money to purchase the products as long as they get a good return on that investment. And fundamentally, the reality is fertilizer prices are going up, but commodity prices are going up as well. So farmers' return on investment is still strong from those investments.
And talking about investments now, we're having the African Development Bank also making a commitment of well over $520 million in Nigeria, talking about agro-processing zones. This really is a big feature, but in terms of what we should also be seeing at subnational levels, the task. Let's talk about agro-processing value addition. That's the crux of the matter at this point in time, if we are well placed in terms of solidifying Nigeria's position in markets across the world.
100% agree. I think that investment by the African Development Bank is really exciting. I think their plans are to help to support 5 to 7 of these sites in the near term and potentially expand that even further. I do think that at the subnational level, really one of the fundamental investments that can be made is actually investment in rural roads. I think the reality is studies have shown that basically if you invest as a government in rural roads, it's one of the best ways to help improve farm productivity, because what you end up doing is reducing the costs of getting inputs, fertilizer, seeds, chemicals into farms, and also making it easier and cheaper for farmers to sell their produce out. So it has a huge impact on farmers' ability and willingness to invest in productivity enhancements.
Well, thank you so much for your time on the show today, Mr. Masha. We'll continue to keep tabs on how well Nigeria is faring in terms of feeding its people. Thank you so much for your time. That was Kola Masha, the Chief Executive Officer of Babban, Gona.